Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to my team career mode as we prepare for episode 14 at Spa. And we continue on with our Pirelli duel, if you would, our rivalry with Tremblay. And this is our final run of 3. Again, just to reiterate, you need to win all 3 head-to-heads in order to get the maximum acclaim and cash bonus. So leading on to the back straight, we look to try and get a good run, tuck into that slipstream, and hope that we have enough momentum to slingshot us for an inside move into the hairpin. Unfortunately, oh, not the hairpin, the chicane. Unfortunately, though, we kind of screw it up and lose too much momentum. Spa-Francorchamps. And I don't think we're going to be able to get this overtake done. We try and set up Tremblay up for the switchback, but unfortunately, we don't really do that very well either. Wheel spin on exit as we drift out, wriggle the wheel in frustration, but we will only win 2 out of 3 runs and get a silver medal. Now looking back at the previous round, and outside of hitting Gasly a couple of times, we didn't really achieve much. Unfortunately, a gearbox failure saw us retire from the session, our first mechanical failure of the season, and hopefully our only one, but we'll have to wait and see. They are random, of course, so there is potential for us to have more throughout the year. A little bit disappointing, but ultimately our pace at the Hungaroring was not amazing. We prepared for Spa, though. A couple of nice upgrades, but unfortunately the monocoque chassis upgrade did fail, and that's a pretty major upgrade and would have really slingshot us in the R&D department relative to the other teams, but there's nothing we can do about that. I believe I'll have to wait until Italy for that to be available. Anyway, we move forward into the practice sessions onto our qualifying sim run to see just how good our pace is with those upgrades. Really starting to build this car up into something that is remotely drivable, and it's not been a bad run. Half a second up here. Currently 8th in the session as well, giving me a bit of confidence that heading into qualifying we won't look too bad at all. Unfortunately though, Spa does have a lot of long straights, this being one of them, and that's where we're likely going to lose a lot of our time. 1, because the AI are a little bit overtuned in straight lines, and 2, our actual powertrain package is lacking behind the competition a little bit. That's not where I've invested a lot of my resource points, so it might prove to be a little bit costly here. We crossed the line, ultimately 3/10 up on the time. At least I thought. Apparently, it wasn't. So I don't know if I'm tripping or what the hell happened there. Anyway, we move forward now to real qualifying, and this is where the times will really matter as we suit up and get ready. A little bit tricky to have a gauge as to where we really sit. Heading on to our final flying lap of the session though, currently in P20, so our first run leaving a little bit to be desired, but I know that there's time on the table through La Source, the first hairpin. The long run down now to our Rouge up through Radion, looking to nail this and get a nice run onto the straight, and that was a really good line indeed, trying to straight line it as much as possible, but activate the DRS onto the Camel straight. Really long. We know that we're probably going to lose a lot of time here, but nonetheless now into the comms. Lecom. My pronunciation probably leaving a bit to be desired, but our line really good through there, using every bit of the track possible, up by a 1/10. Through yet another hairpin now. Tough to get traction out of this corner through No Name, which hasn't been reprofiled in this year's game, so hopefully that will happen through an update or perhaps in the next title, but we did find a lot of time. Up to almost half a second, the checker flag waves. And we'll see if we can carry this momentum through the rest of the lap, as we are currently in P22 behind our new teammate in Jack Aitken, who's actually been performing quite well. Been really impressed with him. Don't know as to whether or not he'll improve, but we are definitely looking like we will. That Delta in the green, losing a little bit of time on this straight, but nothing major, only negligible. Do the left-hander now flat. Not much weight in the car, low fuel. As we try and brake as deep as we possibly can into the chicane, we nail it pretty well there. Very bumpy through this section, really tough to get through cleanly. As we short shift up to 4th, now 5th. crossing the line, straight lining it as much as possible, and it will be a disappointing P20. I guess the positive is, though, we can use this as an opportunity to get some fresh power unit components into the car ahead of the race. Hopefully they don't fail, like Hungary.
Welcome along then to the Belgian Grand Prix, the race that gave us the maiden victory for the Jordan team back in 1998. And in the same team, the phenomenal debut of a young Michael Schumacher. There's always something special just around one of the many corners of this fan favourite circuit. Spa-Francorchamps then, a historic 19-corner circuit with a lap distance of 4.35 miles. There's over 100 metres of elevation change here, and with long stretches of the lap spent flat out, a good top speed will be vital for success. It's time to take a look at our starting grid for today's race. A fantastic effort from Charles Leclerc yesterday, and it's put him on pole, edging out Lando Norris, who'll start from P2. As we continue through the rest of the grid today, we have Verstappen, Hamilton, Daniel Ricciardo, and Perez, Bottas, Mick Schumacher, Fernando Alonso, and Carlos Sainz, Ocon, Tsunoda, George Russell, and Stroll, Albon, Joe, Pierre Gasly, and Jack Aitken. Vettel, they've taken a grid penalty. Magnussen, Latifi, and Mir. That's it then, it's time to go racing as we head down trackside for today's race. Anthony Davidson also joins me in the commentary box today. Why don't we talk about Ferrari? What do you make of their performance so far this season?
Well, the atmosphere within that team seems very positive at the moment. Everyone seems like they're in great spirits and having a lot of fun doing what they do, and that's definitely contributed to the performances we've seen.
Well, here we are then on the grid for the Belgium Grand Prix, and unsurprisingly, we are at the rear of the grid despite Latifi, and I believe it was Magnussen and Vettel from memory ahead, also taking penalties. But we'll just see what we can achieve. Underfueling the car, of course, to get maximum pace. We might jump onto the personalized strategy as well to be a little bit more aggressive. I'll have to wait and see. But it is pretty unlikely we're going to score points in this race. All about just getting to grips with the newly upgraded car and seeing if we can find some positions. We released for formation on lap, and as always, trying to get a lot of heat and energy through these medium compound tyres, and it looks like the cars around us, for the most part, will be running the mediums as well, so certainly the favoured strategy.
We're not seeing any technical issues coming off the practice starts. Watch the RPM.
As we look to park now into position, as we wait for the lights. 5 ignite. And we're off. Let's see how good our first lap can be. As we get a decent run on Magnussen, he's unable to box us out, but unfortunately our teammate in Aitken will be a roadblock up ahead. So we probably didn't pick the best line, but there really wasn't much else to go for us there in terms of room. Now in P21 though, so we confirm that position on the Haas. As it's 3 wide up ahead, up our Rouge and into Radion. Very messy. We're forced to avoid our teammate there, going off the track a little bit, but that was trying to avoid him. Evasive action. Magnussen though gets a good run, able to get us down the Camel straight. We look to maybe fire it down the inside as he goes down the inside of our team, and it makes contact and we get stuck to the curb. And there are a multitude of curbs on this track which are extremely dangerous. You do not want to go on them, and if you do, no accelerator or you will instantly get spat out, just as we have. Now 6 seconds behind our teammate ahead and in dead last, P22 of 22. For the remainder of the race, we are going to be playing catch up. So fingers crossed we can get a safety car or two to get us back in the race. Russell and Aitken both pit on the conclusion of the first lap, so clearly taking damage. I can only assume Aitken getting hit by Magnussen and Russell up front taking damage. And the Mercedes will jump onto the softs. As we fast forward to lap 10. Not really much taking place. And we will dive into the pits. No, apparently I'm going to flashback. So I'm just going to pretend you guys didn't see that. I think I clattered the wall, right? I wasn't honestly paying too much attention, and clearly on the pit entry I wasn't. So we will reattempt that, almost understeering again into the wall. But we slowed down for the pits. Again. Y'all didn't see that. We didn't bring back too much of the gap ahead. We did a little bit, but again with DRS online, as DRS transform, we lose a lot of time on the straights, so it kind of compounds itself. A real opportunity to get back into this race if there is a safety car. So that's what we're waiting for. Onto the hard tyre compound. Good stop from the team. Another 2.7 second pit stop, so can't complain too much about that. On exit, we will be racing Russell, potentially, as he steams ahead. The team telling us to push, and we will try to. But our tyre's not up to temperature, and unfortunately our package not quite as good as the Mercedes, so I'm assuming he'll probably get ahead pretty easily here. On to lap 12 though, and we're actually catching Norris, who, if I remember correctly, actually started in quite a strong position. I think McLaren in general are actually really good on this track. I could be mistaken. Nonetheless though, finding actually really good pace down the Kemmel Straight, so I don't know if Norris actually has an issue of some sort, but we're going to take full advantage and see if maybe we can get our first real on-track overtake here in the race. Unfortunately, our momentum halted a little bit there as we enter the second sector. Through the hairpin once more, trying to gain ground, but as is Spa, it's quite difficult to achieve an overtake through this second sector, so it's more so about trying to tuck behind and probably setting him up heading into the chicane towards the end of the lap. But for that to be a possibility, we need to be inside of that slipstream, and at the moment just starting to fall out of it a little bit. Our pace through here not great, lacking a bit of downforce, and the chassis still quite bulky. You can see just how much of the curb we're having to use to try and maintain momentum through those sweeping S's. Nonetheless though, within 8/10, no DRS on this straight, of course. It would probably be a little bit dangerous through the left-hander up ahead. Without DRS, that could get very, very hairy. But it also does mean that we can't gain as much ground as I would have liked into the chicane though. And we'll see if perhaps we can stay within a second for the Kemmel Straight. We do get DRS on the first zone across the start-finish line. But unfortunately, Norris does find a bit of a second wind here, and he is absolutely gone onto lap 17. That gap out to 10 seconds, so we're in the middle of nowhere. Latifi, 8.5 behind. Might be a bit of a threat with 5 or so laps remaining in the race. We'll have to wait and see. Russell pits again. So he's had a bit of a bad race. That alternate strategy not working out. And again, no safety car in this race, so he's probably banking on that as well and just didn't get it. Might be racing with him on exit perhaps, but it looks like he's actually still in pit lane. Big train of cars up ahead, and we just couldn't catch it. They all have DRS, so they're finding a lot of time on these laps naturally, and they're not holding each other on up through that second sector, for example, for us to be able to find back the difference. On to lap 21 though, and Russell has caught up to us on those fresh mediums, and we might have a little bit of a battle on our hands here. A final duel in a race which is otherwise being quite uneventful for us. Let's see if, just for the sake of our ego, can we keep the Mercedes behind us onto the final lap of the race. Russell looking down the inside, heading into La Source. Able to cover that though. Down into second gear, slow at the apex so that we can try and compromise his run now. Up the straight, Russell whizzes past, but we decide to tuck behind. We know that we can find this back up through Radion and Arouge, or Arouge then Radion. Now we get DRS and we can attack back onto the Mercedes. Plenty of overtake available here for the final lap, and we get the move done cleanly down the inside. Looking to break as deep as we possibly can, down into fourth gear, and we fire it into the corner. But now we're going slow, and the yellow flag's being waved, and I forgot to conserve my fuel properly. The team, I swear, did not give me any warnings throughout the race, and I just lost track of it. I closed the MFD menu with, I think, like 5 laps to go or something. And yeah, that happened. So, bit of a blunder from me. A little bit embarrassing, and unfortunately means that we can't obviously battle Russell anymore. And now he might actually be under threat from Latifi behind, and even Jack Aitken, who is a huge 17.5 seconds behind. We're just going to use overtake now the rest of the lap to hope that maybe we can make up for a bit of the pace. Now we're obviously going to be lacking when you run into low fuel mode. When you go into low fuel mode, the car is extremely sluggish. Probably fortunate that the game doesn't sim it to the point where you can actually physically run out of fuel and the car completely stops. I don't believe that's possible. Instead, you just enter the tractor mode, which is slightly slower than our normal straight line speed. Latifi will fly past, so that's us down into P20. As you can see, Gasly actually DNFing from this race, and I believe Tsunoda as well didn't have a great race either. So if there's any consolation, we actually have been saved in this race. AlphaTauri had a bad performance all around, so any threat of them re-finding a margin against us in the Constructors' Championship really isn't there. So look, Aitken will pass us. We'll look to cross the line. P21, not really a race to remember, but fortunately for us, AlphaTauri also dropped the ball, and we'll try and refocus heading into the next round.
So let's review the drivers' standings. Charles Leclerc, currently leading the championship standings, extends his lead even further with this result. Well, after an incredible day of racing, who was your driver of the day, Ant?
I have to say Sebastian Vettel certainly caught my eye during today's race. Incredible driving.
It's time to see how things are shaping up in the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari continue to extend the gap at the top of the table. There was also a strong showing from the McLaren team today as they made their way up the standings. It's been an absolutely wild weekend of Formula One action, and I can't wait to see what's next.